I will be doing a Let's Practice question from Topic 15, Video B. The problem states, a compound contains carbon, sulfur, and chlorine. The compound is 10.4% carbon and 27.8% sulfur. What is its empirical formula? For step 1, we would need to assume that these values are out of 100%. The compound contains carbon, sulfur, and chlorine, so we would take 10.4% of carbon plus 27.8% of sulfur to arrive at 38.2%. Then, we would subtract this value from the total, which is 100%. This gives us 61.8% of chlorine. For the second step, we would convert these percentages to grams and finally the grams to moles. We have 10.4% carbon. This, in turn, becomes 10.4 grams of carbon. We would divide this value by the total molecular mass of carbon, which is 12.01 grams, to arrive at 0.87 moles of carbon. We would do the same thing with the percentages of sulfur and the percentages of chlorine. 27.8 grams of sulfur would give us 0.87 moles of sulfur, and 61.8 grams of chlorine would give us 1.7 moles of chlorine. For step 3, we would divide each of these values of moles by the smallest number of moles. We find that the smallest number of moles is 0.87. For carbon, we would divide 0.87 moles of carbon by 0.87 moles to give us 1 mole of carbon. The same goes for the moles of sulfur. We would get 1 mole of sulfur. For chlorine, we would divide 1.7 moles of chlorine by 0.87 moles of chlorine to give us 1.95 moles. We would round that 1.95 to the nearest integer to get 2 moles of chlorine. For step 4, we utilize the newly accumulated moles to create a ratio for the empirical formula. This ratio would be C1S1Cl2, based on the values that we arrived at in the previous step. Since adding ones is not necessary, the empirical formula becomes CsCl2.